What's up, people? I'm Shaggy, the opinionated hippie. Got the day off, so currently recording this much earlier than I normally do, so it's lighter in this room. Anyways, that's apropos of nothing. Yes albums. Gonna rank the Yes albums according to my favorite. That's all this is. Gonna do it in two parts. 23 studio releases. I'm going to reduce it to 22 because I'm combining Keys to Ascension into one release, especially since there was a Keys to Ascension studio release that followed after 1 and 2 were released. I'm also going to include, there was one album that came out, Fly From Here, came out mid 2000s, I think, 2011. And then years later, it was redone. The vocals were redone. There was a song that was added. One of the songs got sort of extra part got added to it. So I'm going to review the newer version of that just because that's the one I'm familiar with. How did we get here from Zappa? We got here from Zappa in 1984, 1988 during Frank Zappa's Bamboozled by Love. He dropped in the dun-dun-dun-dun-dun-dun, Owner of a Lonely Heart vamp, over which to solo, which was fantastic. Also, if you were to look at the prog rock family tree, there's a lot of connections. Adrian Belew was in a band with called King Crimson with Bruford. Bruford was in Yes. Steve Hackett, Chester Thompson played in Genesis with Steve Hackett. Steve Hackett was in GTR with Steve Howe. Blah, blah, blah. A lot of connections, but mainly Owner of a Lonely Heart. Also, my personal experience with Yes, I checked out after Big Generator in the 80s. Actually, I checked out after Anderson, Wakeman, Bruford, and Howe. Both that album and that tour I thought were incredibly disappointing. I've heard every album since then, within a month or two of them being released. I found some way to check it out. I bought a couple of them. But I have to admit, I don't listen to much Yes after... I don't listen to Big Generator, but after 90125, most of the stuff I listen to is 90125 and earlier, except for one album. There is one album post that I actually really, really enjoy. I see why people like them. To me, I need it to be heavier, maybe. I think the post 80s era, the proggy stuff I like way more than anything else. The proggier it is, the better. But I also think they lost sort of an evil edge. I've always thought of Steve Howe as a psych guitar player who happens to be in a prog band, and that sort of psych evil energy that Howe brought specifically, sort of mixing with the Anderson prog energy, I thought was like what made the early stuff so dynamic. Plus Squire might be one of the best bass players ever. So I don't know a lot of this. I mean, I'm not as familiar with this stuff after Big Generator, but I'm going to review it anyways. I'll give you my thoughts. Also, 2 complaints. Any singer other than John Anderson, for some reason, at some point, and John Davison especially, they sound like the guy from Death Cab for Cutie. What is that guy's name? Ben Gibbard? Is that his name? Ben Gibbard? John Davison especially sounds like Ben Gibbard. And I like Death Cab for Cutie. I just don't want Ben Gibbard singing my Yes songs. So I have an issue with that. Also, I think every producer in the 80s and 90s, and maybe even a couple of those other albums, owes an apology to Alan White, because I don't think anybody did Alan White's drums a service. They sound flat. They're mixed horribly. I just think there will be moments on some of those albums that are really good, and then the drums come in and it just like deadens the sound. I don't think Alan White got a fair shake on a lot of his drum sound. He's a heavy snare drum hitter. He comes down hard on that thing, but I think I think some of the producers maybe could have served him a little better, because I don't think a lot of this stuff sounds very good. But anyways, that's all I got. I'm going to do them 22 through 11 on this one. I'll put it up on the screen when we're done. And then the second video, I will do my top 10. But anyways, on to number 22. All right, the bottom of the list, we got 22, 21, and 20. We got 3 albums, all produced by Trevor Raven. Trevor Raven was the guitar player on these. Steve Howe was also on a couple of them, right? He was on Union. He's not on Talk. He's not on Big Generator. He was there for Union. But I put these together because these all sound just, I hate the sound on this. I hate the drum sound on it. I hate the production on this. It just, there's not enough prog in the music. I think it's a little more hard rock than anything else. Um, and sorry, I feel bad for like dissing Trevor Raven, but these are by far my least favorite albums. I don't listen to them. I kind of still listen to Big Generator every once in a while because it is kind of a train wreck, but it's a little bit fascinating. And it was the last one I was into back in high school. Talk, I don't think Talk has pretty much anything going for it. There's one good song, Real Love, which kind of has some slow down energy, a little bit more of a low key type thing, which I kind of think works. Everything else on this album, I just does nothing for me. It just leaves me cold. I think it sounds horrible. I don't think the playing has anything interesting in it. I just think it's just not a very good album. Though I've heard people say they really like it or not like it, but I've heard them call it the best of the Raven albums, which confuses me. Union, this was the one. It's called Union because you have like the new Yes, which was the Big Generator with Trevor Raven on there. And then you have like Bill Bruford coming back, Rick Wakeman coming back, Steve Howe coming back. A whole bunch of other extra musicians playing on here. Tony Levin's on here. It's just a mess. I think the highlight of the album, by far, the highlight of the album is Masquerade, which is like this 2 minute and 15 second Steve Howe acoustic guitar piece. I think that's pretty much the only thing on here that kind of really works. Everything else is like, there are moments, because on any Yes album, there are always moments. If Steve Howe's doing a guitar solo somewhere, it's probably worth checking out. Chris Squire's usually bringing some good bass energy, but really, the only thing I like on this album is Masquerade. And then we get to Big Generator, which I have at number 20. Probably has the worst song Yes ever did on it. This came out in 87. The other two were like, 91 and 93, I think, for Talk. 91 for Union, and then Talk was a couple years later. But anyways, Big Generator might be the worst thing they've ever done. Just absolutely horrible. Production-wise, song-wise, move it to the left. Horrible. I'm Running might be one of the weirdest things they've ever done. It's got this little do tequila vibe to it. Somehow it's pretty bad, but at the same time, it's also kind of interesting in its car wreck style. I think Rhythm of Love has some beautiful vocal harmonies on it. Just absolutely gorgeous vocal harmonies on it. Shoot High, Aim Low is like no payoff. Some really good energy and a really good groove. It's just the payoff is bad. And there's like an extended solo by Raven that just, I think if Howe had been delivering the solo, I might like it better, but I don't think Raven does a good job. And then they have this almost straightforward rocker called Almost Like Love, which kind of works. But the rest of this album is just kind of a weird, disastrous train wreck. The production sounds way too 80s-ish. But there are some shiny moments in it. But for the most part, I think these are by far the three least Yes sounding albums and just least inspired, and the production I don't think is that good. And yeah, I hardly ever listen to them, but I go back to Big Generator every once in a while for the train wreck aspect of it. And I do think Big Generator, I think that wins the prize for their worst song ever. But yeah, that's my number 22, 21, and 20, the three Trevor Raven albums. On to hopefully some better stuff. Number 19 is their 17th studio album, Open Your Eyes. This came out in 97. It's got Anderson. Steve Howe is back. He's in the band. Like, Raven's no longer around. They'd already done Keys to Ascension earlier, but this was the follow-up to those two. Chris Squire, Alan White, and then Billy Sherwood is now in the band, playing guitars, keyboards, other things, recording, doing stuff. Him and Squire apparently had worked on some of these songs, brought them to Yes. It's just an uninspired album. There's still some production issues lingering over from just the 80s and 90s, just that dead, overly produced, just sterile studio sound. Fortune Seller is like the one song I kind of like on here. I think it's got a pretty good little organ solo that needs to be longer, but the rest of the stuff just does nothing for me. It's just kind of bland. It's just, I think anytime Howe is playing a guitar solo, like, we're in for the win. Anytime Howe is like contributing overall to like the direction of the song, I think we're in for a win. But for the most part, Yeah, maybe a little better than the other three. Big Generator might be more interesting. I don't think the songs are better on Big Generator, but it might be a little more interesting. But for the most part, yeah, I don't know. It's just kind of a forgettable album. I just don't think there's anything exciting on it. There's no like absolute must-hear track. There's one good track, a little bit, but other than that, I think it's kind of a forgettable album. But yeah, that would be my number 19. Open Your Eyes. They're 17th. All right, we have number 18, number 17, and number 16. And these are the three John Davison albums. I cannot do his voice. He sounds like Ben Gibbard of Death Cab for Cutie. And it just takes me out of whatever we're in. These three albums, the highlights are without a doubt the proggy elements. The more prog they are, the better. I think there's some of the keyboard sounds that are being used on all three of these kind of are very 70s ish, which sometimes work for me. Sometimes it's a very Alan Parsons type keyboard sounds. It just sounds dated. I think Steve Howe and Chris Squire, when they're here, as always, elevate it. Howe's guitar playing, I think, are the highlight for any song that has a highlight. They're three rough albums. Heaven and Earth. This one came out in 2014. I think it's the least successful of the three. The last two songs are probably the best. It Was All We Knew, which has some really good Howe playing in it. Subway Walls, which is, I think, the longest. Yeah, the longest on here, and also probably the most proggy. I think those two work best. But for the most part, there's just a lot of moments that I'm just like, don't work. I think Light of All the Ages is the one that has like a full-on like disco groove to it. I'm pretty sure that's the one. It's almost like a 2010 era sort of dance poppy type thing, but this is Yes, an interesting song. But the vocals, and they kill me on this. But Heaven and Earth would be 18. 17 would be their most recent, which came out a couple months ago in May of 2023. No, this is the one that is the disco thing. I think it's Living Out Their Dream that is the pure on disco number, if I'm not mistaken, right? There's some moments on here, like Mirror to the Sky starts off promising enough. It's like this 13-minute song with some pretty interesting prog sections to it. But then as soon as we get to the vocals, I'm out. Like, I just don't care. Luminosity is another one that starts good, but as soon as the vocals hit, I'm just like checked out. I don't know, just nothing really to pull me in. And then the one that I think is maybe the best out of these, the one that came out in 2021, their 22nd, the third of these is The Quest. The Ice Bridge starts off with some pretty like declarative, cheesy 70s keyboard action. Like we're hardcore in prog territory right here. And then we just have some interesting moments throughout, a couple longer songs. But there's this really kind of starts off pretty strong. I think the first couple songs are pretty strong, but then we just get this lull of songs in the middle that just kind of don't do anything for me and kind of drag it down. And then there is a bonus disc, and I think the bonus disc stuff might be no, it's not. Sister Sleeping Soul might be kind of good, but no, none of it's kind of good. Mystery Tour, which Steve Howe wrote, might be the worst song about the Beatles ever. It's pretty bad. I think the lyrics are pretty bad. Like they're name dropping a bunch of like Beatles songs and it's just kind of cheesy and doesn't work. I don't know. They're all probably at the same ranking. I'd probably put them all at like 16. They're all equally not that good. I just don't get anything out of him. His voice kills me. Steve Howe saves the day for most of them. Maybe a couple interesting Chris Squire bass lines throughout. But yeah, I can't do this. I can't do these. But they have moments. And the production, I think, is warmer, more colorful. I think it sounds more like a Yes album than those Raven produced things, that I've already talked about on this list. I think there's a little more inspiration. Like, I don't like it because Davidson's voice is just too mid 2000s Death Cab for Cutie-ish for me, and that takes me out of the Yes experience. But I could see why people could like this stuff. I think there's some kind of interesting stuff on some of this, but it just doesn't do it for me. I want a harder edge. And Mirror to the Sky has on a orchestra, right? That's the one that has the orchestra on it. One of these has an orchestral thing on it, right? But the orchestral, yes, this is the one that has the orchestra on it. The orchestral stuff, anytime there is sort of an edge, I feel like the orchestral stuff just robs it of the edge. Like, just like, oh, we're going to rob you of the edge and just take that edge away. And so the orchestral stuff is pretty interesting, and they're trying, but for me it's just not what I'm looking for. It's not bringing whatever that weird sort of vibrant energy that an ELO would bring to their stuff. It's a much more softer, just gentler sort of palette of cushiony music that it's sitting on that I kind of don't want for my Yes. But anyways, I'm rambling at this point. Those are my 18, 17, and 16, the John Davison albums. Number 15 is 2001's just Magnification. This came out the day before 9/11. Were we releasing albums on Mondays? Wasn't that on a Tuesday? That's interesting. But anyways, first off, the worst album cover, right? I mean, that's the most un-Yes album cover ever. Did you notice it seconds ago? Also, this is a 4-piece band. John Anderson, Steve Howe, Chris Squire, Alan White. It doesn't feel like a 4-piece band. It is like the idea that like they've wrought the production on this. There's so much production. They're using an orchestra, and I think some of the orchestral elements are used pretty well, actually. But like, it just seems like a missed opportunity because it doesn't feel like 4 guys in a room playing music. It doesn't feel like rock band. Yes, it feels like just happens to be 4 musicians playing on this overproduced album. So I do think they missed an opportunity to maybe capture a little more spontaneity out of this group of musicians who had been playing together for decades at this point. But I think it is by far the most interesting album I've talked about so far on this list. I think the opening Magnification kind of has the highs and lows of everything that's on this album. Some fantastic Chris Squire bass playing, some fantastic guitar runs. The use of the orchestra and the sort of chaos that takes over at the end is fantastic. Some of the vocals are hit and miss and don't always work. And I think that kind of is the entire album. Like there's this 10-minute song, In the Presence Of, another 10-minute song, Dreamtime, which have some really cool moments throughout them, like either some really good doo-doo, like nice Chris Squire bass work, some good acoustic Howe work, there's some good riffs from Howe, but like the songs themselves, when like Anderson is stepping up and singing the actual song that all the sort of prog musical elements and classical things they're all supporting, the songs don't lift up everything else. It's like the songs are kind of average, and it's the playing by Howe and Squire and White and sort of their use of the orchestral elements and all of that stuff, which makes it interesting. And so you're really just kind of waiting to like get through the vocals, or I am, to get through the song to get to the really, really good stuff. So yeah, I mean, songs like Soft as a Dove. No. I'm just saying some of their song titles give away what you're gonna find out in something called Soft as a Dove. I think maybe Magnification, the opening track, is the most interesting on air. Those 2 longer 10-minute tracks toward the end have some really good moments, and you kind of get a sense of like early Yes prog action in there. A song called Give Love Each Day, which should be horrible because it just sounds like a cheesy song, isn't that bad. Like they managed to salvage some pretty good stuff out of this. Though I do think, I don't know, it seems like more than anything a missed opportunity to get these 4 guys in a studio and just let them play these songs. Just let them like, I don't know, like seep in them. And I don't know. I feel like this could be something better. But anyways, it's not bad. It's definitely, I think, a step up than everything else that's been on this list so far. And that's number 15, Magnification. Number 14 is their 18th studio album, 1999's The Ladder. I think this has 3 really, really strong songs. The opening track, Home Home World, the latter, starts off kind of, you get a little spaciness and this little like almost banjo type back porch thing comes in before we drop into like some more typical proggy yes territory. There's some sort of like some Mo energy in here, like Mo's version of prog. I think we're kind of getting a little bit of that in this. I think the ending, not the last song, but the penultimate song, New Language, which is a longer kind of proggier song, works really well. And song right in the middle of the album, sort of in the middle, number 7, To Be Alive, Hep Yada. I think it's one of the best things they've done. I think it's an absolutely fantastic song. More of like a straightforward, just prog rock, kind of alternative prog rocky type straightforward pop song, but it is just fantastic. The writing is fantastic. The lyrics are great. The melodic hooks are great. 3 really, really strong songs to open, close, and kind of hold the middle down. Everything else is kind of good. I think there's some good energy on here. It Will Be a Good Day has some good energy. The Messenger has some good energy. There's a couple songs early on, Lightning Strikes and The Really Short Can I, which have almost this like jaunty, almost world beat type of energy that just does not work with Yes. And I think had those 2 songs maybe come later in the album and we can get a lot of the better stuff out of the way, I think the album maybe holds up a little more. The fact that it's the 3rd and 4th song after a really strong opener and a not bad second song, I think those 2 songs are like, what is this? What are they doing? Why? And then it's like scratching my head. But then we get back to some more good stuff. But 3 fantastic, fantastic songs on here. And I think it kind of lifts everything else. Who's on here? This is like a 6-piece band. So we got John Anderson, Steve Howe, Chris Squire, Alan White, plus you have Igor Koroshev on like synthesizers, piano, and then Billy Sherwood still doing a whole bunch of other stuff, guitars, tambourines, shakers, backing vocals, other stuff. But anyways, yeah, there's some horns on Lightning Strikes, which isn't necessarily a good thing. But yeah, not a bad album, but there's a couple songs which are just kind of out of left field and kind of don't fit. But there are 3 really good songs. And To Be Alive, I think it's just, I don't know. It's a really good kind of alt rock, alt type indie rock type song that just works well. I think it's a great Anderson vocal, great melody, just great energy. But I really, really like that song. But yeah, not a bad album. I think we're getting a little bit better right here than we have been. And that's number 14, The Ladder. Number 13 is Keys to Ascension, the studio tracks. So they put out Keys to Ascension 1 and Keys to Ascension 2. They both had a live component, then they both had studio tracks. The band that is doing these studio tracks is Anderson, Howe, Squire, Wakeman, White. Fantastic band. And this is by far the best stuff they've done, right? Post, other than one album, which is still on this list, this is the best stuff they've done post 90125, post the Raven period. The stuff is very proggy. It's very, for the most part, I think on part 1, the shortest song is what, like, there's one, I can't even find my songs. Those are the live tracks. Where are the studio tracks? I can't find my studio tracks. Oh, yeah. On part 1, there's a 10-minute song and a 20-minute song. The 20-minute song, that is a lot of really distinct sort of different yes-sounding parts. I think the most interesting thing in all of them is the segues between the parts. There's some really neat drum ideas and some neat guitar ideas, and we kept going back and forth between some stuff. I think it altogether works as a long 20-minute song, but I think the segues are some of the more interesting parts of it. Be the One is pretty interesting. I think Be the One. Some of these, like I'm losing track of which one's which, but there's some really good Howe guitar playing in it. One of them is this great, beautiful Steve guitar, Howe slide guitar outro. Just some really good stuff. So there's 2 studio tracks that total 30 minutes on Keys to Ascension 1. And then Keys to Ascension 2, I think, has 4 more tracks that are studio tracks, the shortest of which is 6 minutes long, 5 tracks. The long Mind Drive at 18 minutes I don't think is as successful an epic prog song as that is, but it's still pretty good. Footprints has some good energy, a little plotting at first, kind of like Talk, but a little more energy, but definitely gets better towards the end. Yeah, they're just really, it sounds like they're going back to prog roots. It sounds like they're more interested in creating longer proggier songs, which I think is a good thing. The production, it just sounds better. It sounds just more of a vibrant, colorful. There's depth to it than there was with any of the Raven production albums. Yes, and Billy Sherwood produced this. And then coupled with the live stuff, I don't know. I think it's some pretty interesting stuff. I like it. I think it's by far the most like, it's what I want Yes to be doing as a band is kind of the prog stuff they're doing on here. And I don't think it always works, but I think it's the effort is always in the right place and in the right direction. So yeah, that would be my number 13, Keys to Ascension, the studio tracks. They released one, they released two, and then there was a box set that I'm pretty sure had everything, but I also think there was a release that just had the studio stuff, if I'm not mistaken. But anyways, my number 13, Keys to Ascension. Number 12 is their debut album, Yes. I think the best thing on here is probably their cover of the Beatles' Every Little Thing. Starts off with some really good Back in the Saddle from Aerosmith energy. We get a little Day Tripper quote in there, and then we're off to like a nice little cover. This is pretty much Steve Howe's on a guitar, Peter Banks is on guitar, and I think Banks has some pretty good guitar playing. There are moments where we get a little jazzy, especially I think it's the second song, ICU, a cover of I think it's a Bird song, right? And we get some very, what kind of reminds me of Fish, like late 80s Fish. They're sort of proggy, jazzy mix. I think there's like some of that proggy, jazzy mix in there. We get a little bit of Blood, Sweat, and Tears on one of the songs. Like this is very 60s, like psych pop with elements of prog. I think Banks is a pretty good guitar player. I think the instrumentation, or like the instrumental aspects of the album are stronger. Once we get to the vocals, we definitely planting a foot a little more firmly in the 60s. I'm a huge fan of 60s psych pop, so I like it. So it's some pretty good stuff, but I think it is a little dated, like it's an older album. It sounds like it's from the 60s, but I think it's got some pretty good stuff. Bass playing is fantastic. I'm from Squire. I think Peter Banks is a pretty good guitar player. He's not Steve Howe, who I would put in definitely my top 10, if not my top 5 of all-time guitar players. Got some good stuff on here, like a little anti-war pro-soldier song, Harold Land, couple good covers. Yeah, it's not a bad album, and there's some interesting little sort of prog jazzy excursions that were going on in which people kind of get to step up and flex their instrumental prowess. So it's a pretty good listen. I think for a debut album, it's pretty good. I don't think we're anywhere, not quite hinting at absolutely what we'd be able to do 2 albums later, just sort of the epicness. But I think it's a pretty good release. But yeah, that would be my number 12, their debut album, Yes. Number 11, and the last one for this video, is Drama, 1980s Drama. This is their album in which Trevor Horn and Jeff Downes, the Buggles, are in the band, with Hal Squire, Alan White. This has what might be their second worst song after Big Generator, which would be Into the Lens. I am a camera, just no. On the vocals, I just don't think it's a very good song. Opens up with Machine Messiah, which has some awesome heavy metal, very sort of, not super heavy metal, but definitely some really nice riffing by Howe on guitar. I think once we go away from the metal and we get to the more proggier stuff, I don't think it's as engaging a song, but I really do like the heaviness. White Car is like 1 minute and 20 seconds long, this interesting little thing. Does It Really Happen has some pretty good energy about it. Run Through the Light and Tempest Fugit also. 3, 4 maybe really strong two really strong songs. The opening and closing song, I think, are pretty solid. The other ones are not bad. They're kind of there, but then Into the Lands, which at 8.5 minutes just goes on way too long. It's kind of painful. Don't really like it. But yeah, it's got its moments. There was one more thing I think I wanted to say. Let me see if I can remember what that was really quick. I wanted to mention that Does It Really Happen has this really nice sort of Carouseloramba, that song, Led Zeppelin song, has that kind of like nice stomp about it. Kind of a little bit of that Carouseloramba energy, which for good or bad, whatever you think. But anyways, yeah, pretty good album. Not great, not horrible. Couple really good songs, but a good effort. Not quite good enough to make it in the top 10, but I would put it at number 11. That's all right. And that's all I got for the top 11, the bottom 11, 22 through 11. I'll make a top 10 video in a couple of days and get that up there. Let me know what you think of these albums. Let me know which one you think should be in the bottom 11, which one of these you think is better and should be in the top 10. Always interested in all that kind of stuff. You know how it works. Subscribe, like, share, comment. But if you're not aware of that one song that I really liked off that one album that I talked about, I don't even remember the name of it right now. It was a really good album on a not that good of a really good song on a not that good of an album, and now I can't remember what song it was. But I would go check that song out. It was the one that had Hep something at the end of it. Yeah, I'm forgetting that. But anyways, yeah, you watched the video, maybe you remember. But that's all I got. Subscribe, like, share, comment, all that kind of stuff. And thanks for watching. Peace. Go listen to music, people. Go listen to Machine Messiah and like bang your head for a little while to some Yes. It's the heaviest they might get. Though some of that early 70s stuff is evil as, yeah. All right. Thanks for watching. Peace. Talk to you later.